I'm going to start to walk through a bit of our content here. I'll give you guys a little bit of an intro, obviously, on digits, and then we'll start to introduce our guest speakers, and we'll kind of go to there. In non-surprising news to people that I'm sure on this call, we got thrown for a bit of a pivot this week with all the news around Target layoffs. And so the agenda was reworked a little bit. You'll see here today, we're definitely making time to address what happened at Target, what we've heard, and kind of what some of the vendor takeaways there. Agenda for today is in a few minutes, we'll kind of debrief on Target layoffs and get that lay of the land. Then we're going to go deep into Circle Week with some of our guest speakers. And then we'll start to talk about Q4 in 2026. So that's the agenda for today. For those of you new to Digits, if you're coming in today, a little bit about us. We are a leading independent retail media agency, founded in 2016, coming up on the 10-year anniversary next spring, which should be exciting. And we are based here out of Minneapolis. Not surprisingly, being based out of Minneapolis, our flagship service model is Target, and that's what we're here to talk about today. But we, as an agency, support all omni-channel retailers nationally. So we have our biggest set of business here around Target, and then we work with a lot of vendors, other omni-channel expertise. So Walmart, Instacart, and we have campaigns live at a lot of these tier twos right now, where anybody's pushing retail media and trying to drive more units out the door. We also work for some regional retailers and help them manage retail media. So you might see myself or my team email addresses associated with some of these retailers. So if you're in that part of your CPG, be on the lookout for us. But again, today we are here today to talk about Target. What Digits does at Target is we support retail media full flywheel. So 5 years ago, that used to really just be a bunch of Target Circle work. It is now expanded where Digits, we do Target Circle, we do promotions, hands-on keyboard for paid search TPA, buying media for brands as well, whether that be third-party or first-party Roundel. So today we work with about $6 billion worth of business into Target on an annual basis and a number of the top 10 CPGs. We're the largest Circle provider as an agency, setting up offers to help drive business for brands and provide our client base with sort of best methods expertise across the entire digital footprint into Target. With that, if you have not done Target Circle, many of you I know have, but if you're a little curious on what Target Circle looks like, we have an olive branch to offer sort of for a free market share report. So, we've stored Target Circle data for the last number of years. If you're a brand that hasn't run and you want to know how it's being active in your category, go to our website, fill out this report, and we'll give you a kind of a free info on what we're seeing in the category to help you figure out how you want to activate in that space. All right, shifting gears. Their faces are up. You can see them. So we are here today. I got a couple of guest speakers. So the newest face is Mr. Chris Niesen. So I'm going to introduce Chris first. So here, Chris is the write-up we have on Chris. So Chris is the founder of Retail in Real Time. He is a former VP in retail format development, space planning, and visual merchandising work. He's worked with Target, Whole Foods, Party City, both either direct or as a consultant. Today, through his platform Retail in Real Time, he has published over 500 articles, which I was astonished at that number. So 500 different articles analyzing in-store seasonal everyday planogram resets, store format implementations, new remodel or relocation efforts across over 100 different unique retailers. So Chris is local Minneapolis, so he has expertise obviously in at Target, but his purview of where he's doing it is really national from a unique retailer side. So I would say as a takeaway, if you don't follow Chris on LinkedIn, give him a follow. He's publicizing content very frequently about different sets. And if you want to be up to speed on what's going on in retail from an in-store POG and space planning side, Chris is the right way to go. So with that plug, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you. Introduce yourself a little bit more maybe than what I gave.
Thanks, Dave. I probably couldn't have done the introduction better myself, but I just say a couple of other things. I work with retailers on store format, space planning, and visual merchandising strategies, and it's all around the customer experience. And the goal that I have in all of the work that I do is to inspire, simplify, and perform. And I'd say the last thing, and this will, I think, come through in some of the other things you'll see when I share later, but all of the work that I do has two things at the center of it. One is the customer, and the second one is the store associate. So how do I keep them at the center and as close to that as possible in the work that I'm doing so that the outcome delivers what we want it to deliver? So that's me in a nutshell. Thanks for the nice intro and look forward to the discussion.
Got it. Yeah. And Chris and I, most people on the call probably know I used to work at Target. Chris was at Target in the MPD, I believe it was at the time. I'm actually not sure if they still call those exact same words.
Mhm.
They've
They
changed the
don't.
title. Yeah, they've changed the title. So Chris was in MPD at that time, in space planning and POG, and so very familiar with historical Target approach in that space. But and then the last phase here is a double Chris Thron. Those frequent of our webinars, they know Chris, but Chris, give her a quick intro.
Yeah, Chris Throne. I lead our target team at Digit, so working directly with a lot of vendors, many of whom I see kind of have joined our webinar today, which is great. Supporting Circle promotions, retail media at Target, kind of the full gamut, very digitally focused. And kind of with that side of it, just really excited that we have Chris Niesen here today to talk through kind of that in-store side of things. That's something that I've really taken away from conferences here kind of recently in the fall, just how much of a topic in-store experience is coming back and in the focus on that. So really looking forward to hearing Chris's perspective there.
Cool. Well, for those that look at a calendar, tomorrow is Halloween, and I did debate making everybody wear costumes, but I did not do that. But that would have been more entertaining for our listeners. But I will make sure we're getting a little bit of a Halloween flavor here. So, what is everybody's plans for tomorrow? I would say the weather looks decent in Minnesota Halloween. It could be worse. It snowed, I think, a year or two ago. My takeaway for me, our plans, is I got three kids, and I like to say they have reached pillowcase age, which means they walk around with pillowcases to get their candy because they get so much dang candy. And so my favorite is when we all come back and they dump it out on the ground, and I get to dad tax what I like the most,
Oh yeah,
which
we
um,
heavy dad tax
yeah,
assessment in our household as well.
the 100 grands are my favorite annual tradition. So they're
See,
they're a little rare.
I think you're
Yeah.
safe on the 100 grands though, because like kids go for the
The
sugary
classics.
stuff, the gummies, the airheads. So I think like they're probably fine giving up the 100 grand to dad.
But any plans for you, Chris Throne? You first? Any plans?
Yeah, so my kids I've got two, 8 and 10, just getting to the age where they kind of want to go off and do like, yes, mom and dad have to chaperone, but they want to do, separate trick or treating with their friends. So we are doing a little bit of a divide and conquer with each of them this year. So we will see how that goes.
What about you, Chris Neeson?
My kids are we have our own plans. I hope you have a good Halloween for them.
So a little bit
They're
older.
both in high school, so we'll have some friends over for some dinner, hand out some candy, and hope the kids make it home safe.
Yeah, that's I'm a few years out from that one yet.
Yeah.
So, but we will see. All right, we have to get to this topic, which I think is, the target layoffs. And obviously anybody that is, here on this call likely works with Target in one capacity or another. And so wanted to use this time to share what we've heard, what's happened, and kind of, what are some paths forwards in this space. But, many of us are still quite plugged into Target. But, a bit of what we've heard happened is so 800 people plus impacted in the Minneapolis area. I know they've talked about 100, 1,000, roles impacted. But some of the articles, 800. So it's a bit of a rounding error. I think what was mentioned in press releases largely is true in that it was a big culling of upper middle management, and so the term director seems to be the largest and heavy hit from a positioning point of view. So Target has to publicize the positions that are actually gotten rid of to the government, and so we were able to get our hands on the position titles And if you do that, there were 87 positions impacted that had director in the title, which is the by far the most. Number two was manager, and then lead, and then principal, which is more of a term in marketing and tech. Principal is, but I think their press release said, reducing layers from an operational efficiency. I'd say that anecdotally, it is what seemed to happen. Whether that solves the goal or not is a different question, but that is sort of what it seemed like they did. From a in merch specifically, I know these are the roles that we have heard. I think more at the top, probably from an impact, specifically divisionals and directors of merch. A pretty big hit to director and planning. I know specifically I had some contacts that were, more legacy target folks that were in that role, that were laid off in that space. A few kind of like buyer roles, between senior, regular, and associate buyer. Have heard of some. I had not heard of that very widespread, but I know there are buyer roles that were impacted, and so it might be certain people's divisions here. Um, Also some in PPCOE support areas, and then a smaller on like the merch specialist side too. So I'm sure this is not meant to be exhaustive, but this is sort of what we have heard in the merch space. So I'd say what kind of comes next? Target teams are supposed to be hearing this week. And so, those of you on the call may have, also be hearing this information from your target contacts. But in general, the themes of what we're hearing is, that middle management, or it's hard to call director or middle management because in a business, they're the leader of the business. But from an organization, I think they're more middle, is they'll be merging some of those teams. So if there was a director that was leading a business unit that might not be paired up with the director that was next door, and the person will have a larger P&L responsibility. So that is one way things are kind of merging. The other is scope is being changed as well from for an individual merchant. The word on the street is that individual merchants will be getting more impact and influence and decision power. So a little bit less, hub and spoke, a little bit more tip of the spear, if you will, within that space. We know support areas, PPCOE being one of the largest, it's still intact, but is reduced, both probably from a head count, but also from a role in decision making within that space. And then I'd say lastly, there were some changes on Target Plus. And Target Plus, is kind of a business that's been stop start. Target talks about it a lot, but then it's how to activate sometimes is a little uncertain, and what their strategy there is, as a vendor has seemed a little bit uncertain. And there was more changes there again. And so not exactly certain where that shakes out. But the fact that they've struggled to, I think, define exactly how they want to activate there. And then there were some more changes that I think that it might be another round of uncertainty of what the right strategy go for it is there. So I think with that, the real question is sort of like, what do vendors do next, and within that space? And so, um, Chris Thron, I'm going to turn it over to you, obviously, as the closest to our target business. What have you heard in that space, and kind of what are you looking for vendors to kind of do in the short term?
I mean, short term, I think first, obviously, you need to acknowledge like there is a human element to this, right? Like, people's livelihoods were impacted on both sides. I survived a round of layoffs at Target in 2013, and then I was ultimately impacted 2015. And I think Chris Niesen, I think you shared, you were similar. So it stinks on both sides of it, right? Like obviously getting laid off sucks, and if you survive, your job is going to be, hard and potentially confusing for the next 3 to 6 months. So I think as a vendor, leading with empathy with, how you partner with your buyer, like how can you help your buyer team and how can you help Target? I think, Target will most buyer teams will be a little bit more, receptive to that help kind of moving forward here in the near term. And then I think, longer term beyond that, if there is, positives to come out of some of these changes, you kind of touched on it a little bit, Dave. Fidelki's been really kind of hammering this point in some of his top priorities of reinstituting merchandising authority. And you can kind of see that with what you touched on, with the types of roles that were impacted and, efforts to remove layers. And I think just as a vendor, partnering with your buyer team in a way that is going to drive the category. And I think even coming back to like ideas and asks that, maybe a month ago, even a week ago, might have been a no. If buyers are really going to be, empowered to run their business the way that they know works best. I think as a vendor, you should be really looking to bring those ideas to your buyer and kind of partnering with them those ways.
Cool. I think that makes sense. I mean, what we've talked about a little bit as digits is some of the if the buyers are now quote in charge again, a lot of these buyers weren't in that world. That was more the world when I was a buyer and some of my friends were buyers where, you were the final decision maker, but now maybe you're one of the three decision makers, right? And if they're going
Hmm.
back to the world where the buyer can kind of drive that bus, some of them don't know how to do that. And they might need a vendor that is around and knows this world to help them sort of find that. And so I do think that there could be space for brands to sort of to lead a little bit more from an operations and a decision making, whereas they were kind of cut out and it was a CFT. So
I think it'll be a mix of that. Like, yes, some of them haven't flexed that muscle in a while, and will be looking for help for vendors. Others are, but they just weren't to your point, empowered to say yes. Like they wanted to say yes, but someone adjacent to them, was putting up some guardrails that didn't allow them to.
what about you, Chris Niesen, on experience with layoffs and what maybe in your role you were looking for from brands and whatnot?
Yeah, I'd say first of all, I've been on both sides of it. You mentioned the 2015 at Target. I was part of the Target Canada group, so I've experienced it from that side, and then I've seen it from the other side multiple times while I was at Party City. So, I think where Chris started, of being empathetic to the fact that this is a human situation, is definitely the right starting point. And then, as I was thinking about this, there were two other things that sort of popped into my head. Is first and foremost, everyone needs to get clear on who their partners are, right? Things have shifted. The person that you went to yesterday might not be the person that you go to today. So I think it's going to have to be about getting clarity there. And I'd say the other thing that popped into my head is how does this change priorities and focus for Target? Likely it does. Likely that continues to change over time. And so, I think that's a question that you need to ask once, but also ask often. Like, I think there's going to be some people that will have the answers to those questions, others that won't. So you just have to keep asking until they're a bit more clear, even on what their direction is.
Got it. Well, and I know on a very specific note, I know we have a good number of adult bev people on this call. I would say I know that there were changes on the adult bev team at Target. I don't want to name names in front of everybody, but I'd say if you're in adult bev, reach out to your buyer because there were some changes in leadership there, I believe. Um, and so I know there's other pockets around the store as well too. But just with that concentration of people that I can see the names in here, I'd call that out so you guys know to work with those. So. Okay, we're going to share our screen. We're going to move past that and start to talk a little bit more what our core content is here for today. So I want to give Chris, the platform to walk through what he saw in Target, kind of with his retail and retime work around Circle Week. And the reason that I think this is really important is obviously as digits, we are super close to Circle Week. It's important to our brands. We're driving, tens of millions of volume sort of through Circle Week as a client base. But our expertise obviously is Circle and digital. We're not necessarily in-store merchandising experts. That's not what where our backgrounds are. And so when Chris, I saw he was doing this deep dive, I was like, well, this is a perfect thing. Let's bring this to our vendors. Let's bring this to our brands, and we'll be able to show kind of what this looks like in store. So Chris has got a handful of slides here of how this kind of came to life. And we're gonna walk this through, and then we'll kind of have a discussion about what Target's doing. And I think the way I want you guys on the call to think about it is how is this going to flow forward to holiday, to next year, to Christmas? Like, what are things maybe here that are new, that are drivers for ideas on a go forward basis? So, with that, Chris Neeson, I'm going to turn it over to you for a bit to kind of walk us through your analytics here.
Great, and thanks for the opportunity. So I'll highlight a couple of things before I actually get into the content, just quickly. Most everything that I do and that I publish, I try to do more than a one store synopsis. So this particular deep dive that I did was across visits on 5 different days to 6 different stores. So it gives you a sense that we're not seeing a point in time in one store. Obviously, 6 stores isn't necessarily representative of the chain, but it's certainly more representative of what you might see in just one store. The second thing that I would add is you'll see the titles of the slides. I kind of broke them down into 4 specific themes. They're early momentum, in-aisle activation, amplifying essentials, and expanding the circle. And I wanted to break that out for you because the first two, early momentum and in-aisle activation, what I would tell you is from my point of view and what I saw in stores at this time around during Circle Week, those two items were very similar to what I've seen in the past. So they're consistent with activations in the past, not necessarily anything new and exciting, but something that continues to be a focus for Target during these weeks. And then when it comes to the last two themes, which were amplifying essentials and expanding the circle, those are things that I saw in stores, again, not one store, all stores, where there was a concerted effort to really expand what Circle Week was all about. Deals are certainly the priority and the focus, but they're actually looking to expand it far beyond that. So with that, we'll start with early momentum. Again, similar to what we've seen in the past, as soon as you walk in the store, you knew that something different was happening. And I went into the deals event that was happening actually at Walmart at the same time, and I couldn't have told you that there was an event actually happening, other than
Walmart did seem a little quieter
yeah, other than
with
seeing an
that.
immense amount of rollback signs. There was no real celebration of the fact that something exciting was happening in
Hmm,
store.
interesting.
Yeah. Second thing I would say is the main aisle signage was probably a little bit more extensive than what I've seen in the past, deepening awareness and building momentum a bit deeper in the store. And then there were consistent cues through a lot of the store. And I say a lot of the store because I'll get to it a little bit later, but it's not quite all the way through the store. So we can move on to the next slide. Next thing, again, like I said, this is sort of consistent with what we've seen in the past, the in-aisle activation. Um, First of all, daily deals stood out, bold stanchion signs pointing shoppers to those featured end caps. Almost always they're on a front end cap, so where most of the customer traffic is happening. I also saw a lot more smocks on associates signaling that they were invited to have conversations about Circle, and just another point of awareness that I've maybe seen less of in the past. And then the value messaging lived in the aisle right where the decisions were made. So again, there was a more consistent effort to have a lot of those deals either on the main aisle or merchandised right inside of that main aisle. And again, I know that those are the kind of things that are difficult to impact maybe for a Q4 because space planning decisions happen much further upstream, but there seemed to be a lot more focus on that this time around.
Yeah, I know a question for Chris Thron that we saw a lot of the daily deals and they've done a little bit of this before, right? Either there'd be a Circle Weeks or on like Black Friday or holiday type activations. But from what you saw, Chris, is this similar or was it expanded?
Really elevated for this event. Both like I think the deal curation was a lot more thoughtful and seasonally relevant, and choosing items and categories that guests are really asking for and demanding beyond what category is actually willing to participate. So I think they deserve credit for that. And then like I even noticed some of the in-store execution as well was just even swapping out and moving around those mobile like deal of the day signs on a daily basis. I thought they executed that very well.
Got it.
We can go to the next. So this is where I started to see some things that were maybe a bit different from what I've seen in the past. The first is there definitely seemed to be a lot more of the offers were of the buy one get one variety. Certainly in food, where I saw a lot of 50% off offers and then 25% in commodities. And I wanted to specifically highlight this Kleenex example where you can see in this picture specifically, and I took it from this angle for a reason that not only is it promoted on the main aisle, but you can see directly behind it, it extends all the way into the aisle. So that deal is really prominent for the customer. Again, promoting a stock up mentality more than maybe what I've seen in the past.
Well, and they've got the Circle Week, the signing kind of coming down on the top too, which I know has been hit and miss, right? And so
Yeah, it was much
planning
more
these out.
consistent. It was much more consistent that any end cap that had a circle offer had signage that beyond just the deal offer, that there was actually incremental signage supporting the deal so that you hopefully saw it from a bit further away.
Well, and that's Chris and I, well, and all the vendors on the call, we want signs every day, right? And so like that's probably our battle, if you will, with Target, right? They have started doing a good job at Circle Week, but I want 52 weeks a year of signing, right?
And
Across all of the deals.
it looks like they are getting, close to achieving that from some of the store walks that we have seen as well. But it's, those signs make a big difference, and it's amazing, what, looking A/B at putting one of those up does for performance
You
and
know,
results, and particularly incrementality.
we have one live question which I'll answer, and then it's a good plug for anybody in the call. Use the official Q&A. We will see those, and we'll either answer them live if it makes sense, or else we have time at the end where we'll wrap them up. But there was a question of how many Circle Weeks are happening annually now, and Chris Thron, I'll let you answer that. So.
There are typically three. We will share kind of the tentative date for the next one coming up, but there's typically one in the spring, one in the summer, in July, and then this one typically in October, serving kind of as the early kickoff, if you will, to holiday shopping.
Cool. Well, yeah, so this next section, Chris, I know was really exciting or new when I saw it personally. So let's share with what you saw in the stores.
Yeah, so like I said, this is one of those elements that I saw that was definitely a concerted effort to try and expand Target Circle Week. Less about offers, but tying it into other programs, initiatives, product drops. So I call it expanding the circle. You can call it whatever you'd like. But I saw the effort to try and tie it into cultural events like the launching of their Stranger Things assortment. Again, you can see here that there's not a deal or offer necessarily associated with it, but they specifically added a sign that says Circle Week new exclusive product drop. They tried to tie those limited time products directly to the event in a way that I had not seen in the past. And they tried to make it a bit more immersive, again, blending entertainment, retail, and value in new ways than they've ever done in the past. I've also got a second slide on this because I saw a few more ways that they did this. So again, it wasn't just about Stranger Things, Roblox, Lego. A lot of it was in aisle shippers, the same sign that highlighted, hey, something new is happening. But again, it wasn't just about the fact that something new was happening. It was about that it was happening and it was part of Target Circle Week. So again, there may not be a specific offer to it, but definitely an intent to broaden and make the event feel more compelling than what it has in the past. The one thing that I would say that this did is it extended the event further into the store than what it has in the past. A lot of times it's very, commodities and, food, beverage centric. And obviously this audience is very keen on that. But, a lot of times what I saw is it died as it went to the back of the store. And you still saw this time around that some of that happened where it got a bit quieter as we went to the back of the store, but they certainly maintained momentum further in the store than they ever had in the past and tried to make it feel more comprehensive to the people that are in store.
Yeah, yeah, I think that, what to build on this, like we have seen when we talk to our Circle partners is they don't think of Circle as just promotions anymore. I mean, I know as a shopper, that is probably still what it is because there's hundreds of deals live at any given time. But Target wants it to be beyond that. They want it to be about experiences. They want it to be about special product drops. They want it to sort of be a club, like a special Target club that you need to be part of, right? To get the most awesomeness, if you will, out of Target. And so I think that's a takeaway. Even just say the product drop sign, that was completely new, right? The fact that they're thinking of assortment as like Target circle-y is interesting. And I think that would be a push to vendors is how are you guys thinking about the next Circle Week as a way to offer something new, to be part of that experience that maybe you don't have to go 25% off your product, but you offer something new that week or something exclusive or fun just for Target Circle shoppers.
Or maybe you have a big innovation launch, beyond just launching it at Target, finding ways to partner with your buyer team to, make it part of Circle Week if the timing matches up.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I think that there are ways to try and build on what Target's vision of Target Circle is, beyond just, let's run a great deal on something. Now, those are harder to do because Target wasn't just it's not just a self-service platform. You can type it in and do it. You need partnerships and agreement with Target, and so it's not an easy lift. But for the right deal and the right vendor, I think it makes sense. So. All right. I know shifting a little bit into Q4. Let me pull that up now. Some of the pictures you had there, Chris, as well.
Yeah. So just a couple of last thoughts for me on this. What does this potentially signal for Q4 promotions? I don't think this will be a surprise to many people, but I mean, promotions, right, are constant. You're seeing them more and more often. They're heavier in store on any given week. And so, as you think about larger events like Circle Week and comparable things that are happening in other retailers, creativity, timing, and execution are really going to be the differentiators. The value is getting redefined. It's not just about what it costs. Again, it now starts to feel like what is experience, convenience, and what's the emotional connection to the product. So, is there a story to be told beyond the fact that there's a deal happening? Alignment is critical. This won't be news to anyone. And I just wanted to highlight this one because in this particular instance, Target did a really good job of the deal that I saw in store was the deal that I saw online. And I can't say the same for some of the other retailers that I was in. I saw a lot of disconnects between what I saw on shelf, on product, and in app. There wasn't consistency, and Target had a ton of that this time around. Every time that I went online, I saw the exact same thing that I saw in store. And then the last thing I'd say is, there's just loyalty is shifting. Yeah, brand names alone no longer secure you repeat visits. Again, probably not a surprise, but that relevance, authenticity, and consistency is really what's going to continue to drive returns. So the idea of thinking about your promotions maybe a bit differently than you have in the past, there's just more noise to sort through, and anything you can do to make them stand out is going to be to your benefit and to Target's benefit or the retailer that you're working with.
Well, and I love the shippers and the way that these are coming to life in this space. Vendors love, I mean, pallet drops, ability to get more merchandise in the store, secure extra placements, right? Like that, those are all top initiatives at most of the CPG partners we work with. And so if there's a way to tie that into Circle Week, into just seasonal drops like this native here, right? Just making it obviously very Christmassy where it doesn't then Target likes it because of the way it looks. Um, that's what we're seeing this time of year, and I appreciate you highlighting it kind of for these as a way to kind of bring it to life. But Chris Thron, any last takeaways on the Circle Week execution?
No, I think, Chris Niesen hit on a lot of great points there. And I think, the one that really jumped out to me was the one that I touched on earlier is, and I'll expand on that a little bit, but we had seen the events, get a little bit, tired, repetitive, feeling less special. And I think that was the big thing that jumped out at me is, just, better deal merchandising as I've been calling it, and Target really leading a little bit more in that space and just making sure they're bringing their best stuff for these 3 time a year events.
Yeah. And speaking of three times a year, when's the next one, Chris? So,
Tentatively, we are hearing March week 3 in the spring, which will be a little bit earlier than it was for the spring event this past year, which was April week 1. Part of that is moving up mainly just due to Easter timing, which the Easter run-up week next year will be March week 5. So Sunday of April week 1 is Easter next year. So just getting a couple weeks ahead of that. Would really emphasize the tentative part. Target does wait until the last minute to lock that in, just in case Walmart or Amazon, moves up their event. Target really prioritizes, getting out in front and going first there.
okay, shifting gears a bit, and part of this, our original agenda, if anybody got our email maybe a week-ish ago, was a little bit heavier into holiday, and a little heavier into 2026. When I kicked this off back at noon, I said we shifted gears a little to make sure we had time to talk about layoffs as sort of the hot topic of today. So, That being said, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about holiday. What are we seeing? What are we expecting? Obviously, given the news, given Target's recent activity in this space. And so, Chris Throne, what are you, based on what you're seeing, what are you kind of predicting to happen over these next 2 months or so?
I mean, promotionally, the trend we have seen the past few months that I think will continue into holiday is, really a flatlining in promotions. And I want to be a little bit careful of how I tee that up. When I say flatlining, I really mean from like a spend and investment perspective. So I still think there will be a lot of promotions and Target finding ways to offer promotional value to their guests. But we have seen them get away from, some of the big, broad promotions that, from a vendor side of things, is probably a positive because yes, they do drive business, but it's typically not very efficient and they cost a lot of money. So from like a white space opportunity cost perspective, just less for them to work with, driving their own business. So there will still be promotions, but I think spend will be flat. And, tying back to what Chris Niesen shared in terms of themes, really leaning more on experiences, unique brands, kind of bringing back the Target, if you will. So not necessarily buying traffic with promotions as they've done in the past. And I think part of that is in pursuit of a earning per share number, just to manage their financials to close the year as well.
Yeah, Chris Niesen, anything from an in-store that you're seeing either at competitors or Target that you expect to come to life in a different way this holiday? I mean, the Stranger Things was an interesting example. Are you just seeing more and more of that, or what do you think you'll see in the next couple of weeks?
I'm seeing a lot more signaling of the season further forward in the store. Not seeing as much of that in Target right now, but in a lot of competitors, there's a lot of things obviously that have been pulled earlier, a lot of things that are being pulled more forward. You're seeing a lot more pallet drops in the environments that we're talking about. So I think there's just a lot of effort to get out in front of things as much as possible, knowing that there's potential limited spend happening with a lot of different people to try and be first to market, to grab some of that early share.
What retailers? Walmart specifically, or even different than that?
Yeah, Walmart for sure. I mean, I'm even seeing it, some of the smaller specialty retailers. But yeah, Walmart is the biggest one that they've definitely jumped out in front of things in a way that they haven't even in the past. And signaling the season, long before Halloween is out the door.
Got it. Um, so I see some questions coming in. We're almost to Q&A sections. I think I'm just going to hold some of those and then we'll address them in Q&A. So holiday, if I'm looking at my calendar, what are we, 8 weeks from Christmas? Which makes me a little nervous as a dad that's got a couple of kids to buy, to buy Christmas gifts. But Chris Throne, what can vendors do still at this point, right? Like obviously people have spent months building great holiday plans, but things pop up, things change, you get budget, you lose budget, whatnot. So like where are we at timing wise? What levers exist for brands to still try to like push units out the door?
Yeah, I mean, almost into November here, so definitely in the home stretch of holiday. I would say, two positives that have opened up some more opportunities recently. Target completely revamped their promo process and how they engage with vendors this year, and a lot of that has included some longer lead times, which as that's been a little bit more in market, I think they've figured out ways to accommodate and be a little bit more flexible off process with that. So still opportunities to bring promotions to your buyer team. You certainly would need your buyer to help shepherd that through. But we've seen that be a little bit easier. So I think, you know, getting something in market in November might be a little bit challenging, but certainly December is still on the table there. So opportunities there. Roundel typically a little bit more accommodating with lead times this year. Certainly, like Digits as a 3P media provider back into Target, we can activate on pretty quick turnarounds there as well. So from a timing perspective, like there's still some runway left. I think the bigger challenge for a lot of vendors, honestly, is going to be, many of them, because of the state of Target's business, are operating more on shoestring budgets to close the year. So will need to be a little bit more surgical in how they activate and drive business. So instead of going big and broad, vendors might want to be thinking about, should they be geo-segmenting circle offers or promotions to their top volume stores, running more item-specific promotions that aren't going to require as much markdown spend, or again, looking at third-party media that's generally going to be a little bit more efficient with your dollar there. So I think it's taking advantage of the runway that's left and then being more surgical with how they activate.
Yeah, I know ideas on daily deals, right? Like, as always, are ways to try to drive engagement, right? Obviously, Target's going down that strategy, and we'll see some of that happening as well too, or even just looking at high volume stores, right? And so that's we've had a lot of success with vendors of the old adage is fish where the fish are, right? Like there's
Hmm.
about 300 Target stores that just cook, and so how do we put media and dollars around there to talk to the shoppers around Target that we know those stores are great and there's people coming in and out, but you can always squeeze more volume. And that's typically where we'll get best results on media is around Target's best stores because we're just pushing people back in for people that kind of want to go in, but maybe not today, right? But then they'll get pushed to go, faster.
Hmm.
So well, good. I know want to shift to one last topic. I call it the "you heard it here first" moment. This was and I'm going to share my screen just because we got a great picture of Chris here that I need to pull up. So with this is probably not surprising with layoffs. This is one of our larger sort of attended webinars. And I wanted to, Chris Thron was a speaker last week at an association for coupon promotions. And I want to say, you heard it here first, that we are expecting movement in this space. We don't know when, but the world of retail is rolling out new coupon standards, which again is kind of nerdy of the coupon people here. But it's really exciting that it's going to be coming out. Across retailers. Major retailers are signaling they'll start to roll this out soon. I know some of our Target clients have kind of gotten emails around from Target in this space, kind of make sure they're getting ready so they know how the right way to like redeem and like they're up on the right standards to kind of get reimbursed in this space. And so there's some movement there under the hood. So I'd say our ask is well, two things. One, download an app called Coupon 24. It's sort of an industry pilot test case right now. It helps you use these universal coupons across CVS and other places that's rolled out. And the other is if you have somebody on your team, probably a headquarters person that's more of a coupon, tip of the spear, is connect them with us. We will be able to distribute these for retailers as this comes out. So Chris, I actually think I stole a lot of your thunder here. I was going to have you speak to a lot of this, but I'll turn it back to you. Tell me, you spoke at the conference. What's the gist here, and what should vendors know?
No, I mean, you set the stage perfectly there. And I think, just to add to that, then the two things that I'm most excited about are, again, we are hearing pretty strong rumors that this is going to be, activating at major retailers, hopefully in the first half of the year. So, honestly, probably a little bit sooner than we were even optimistic for. But then, there are kind of test pilots happening in the market today at CVS, and I think that's one of the things that I have now seen some of that data of how that's performing, and just the scale has really blown me away from just a pure redemption volume and engagement perspective, with almost no promotion or marketing behind it. So really signaling that consumers are, going to be hot after these new digital coupons. And I think just as an advantage for hopefully Target getting, out into the market, if not next, soon after, for brands at Target to, be first movers in that space. And then the other piece being, if you look at how brands execute promotions, either through Target or, third party at a national level with digital coupons, difficult processes, a lot of guardrails, lacking in capabilities, a lot of that tying back to just like fraud and coupon abuse issues, which is a huge problem in that industry. This new standard and technology is going to solve for, and a lot of the things that brands wish they could do at Target or wish they could do with their national coupons, they will have those capabilities at their fingertips now. So, opportunity to get that scale, but also to be like really efficient with how they execute. So we're very bullish and excited on how that's going to roll out next year in 2026.
Awesome. Yeah, you'll hear like again, the code word was on purpose. You heard it here first. It's coming soon. You'll hear more from us about it over the time. But want to put that bug in sales leaders and shopper leaders' ears that are in and around Target that this, if today was the first time you heard that, well, then next time you hear it again, you'll kind of have some understanding of what this is. But it could be really impactful over the next couple of years in this space. So. All right, we are shifting to questions, Q&A. So we had a couple pre-submitted, not pre-submitted, submitted live that we'll answer right now. And then if you have one, use the Q&A, type it in. We'll try to get to as many as we can here as we go. So in the order they were received. Chris, I'll have you probably do the pricing one. Sorry, Chris Thron. Too many Chris's on a call. But the question on own brand circle offers are category wide. And so I'll answer that. The question I think is theming is have own brand manufacturers gotten into writing in circles? And I would broadly say not that we've seen a ton. No. And I would even tell you like the own brand use of circle is a lot different than it used to be. Rewind the clock to early days Target Circle or Cartwheel, and there was a ton of own brand offers in there really to drive usage and loyalty of the store. Financial decisions were made that they didn't want to spend that money anymore, and it became a more branded experience.
Or
And I,
having it focused on those own brand, like they still participate, but more at the category level.
Yep. We have seen, so to answer the question, we have seen some own brand vendors that have money, right, or have trade or retail media dollars, whatever. If you have budget to drive your business, that's a Target's not getting. We have seen some of them do more media. So whether they're doing sort of a first party Roundel, whether they're doing third party media, we have seen some of those people activate there to try to drive demand, not necessarily with price but with other ways through awareness and traffic driving media. So that would be one push I would have you look into if you're trying to figure that out. Okay, the Chris Throne, the pricing question around price match.
Yeah, I mean, from what we've seen, and this got announced what 3 months ago, maybe, where they changed their price matching approach. So they are, no longer matching other retailers, which, obviously was a financially driven decision. I forget what markdown bucket that hits there, but yes, I think parity in the marketplace, then they are price matching themselves. So they are, using dynamic pricing, and you will see kind of discrepancies in store versus online. Their fallback to accommodate that from like a guest experience perspective is that they would, honor that price match for whatever is lower.
I'll add on to this, and Chris Niesen, if you've seen examples too, please add in. But I know I was buying my daughter a t-shirt that digital said it was $6, and in store it actually was marked as $5. And they had actually ripped off the little, if you go to like the Cat and Jack or they always have like little perforated little labels. And so they've ripped all those off. And so I think with tariffs and with inflation and whatnot, they have ripped off a lot of those labels and have had to update prices. And so I know in apparel, largely not branded, most people call it branded, but there's been some price changes that they've had to manage through and use store labor to try to figure that out. I don't know if Chris Neeson, you've seen anything in your world there as well. But
Nothing specifically that I would have to add to that.
yeah. Okay, last question that's in right now. So again, if you're on the call and you have a question, please type her in. So is around the use of niche brands to drive consumption, and overall, do we see a movement away from national brands toward niche or regional brands, sort of within Target's promotional preferences? Um, I will sort of add just one flavor question, and then Chris Throne will turn it to you and say, I don't know if I've seen it within promo preferences as much because they Target loves to promo category. They try to, in their worlds, make it as easy for the shopper as well as possible. And so they don't always do category deals, but they like to lean on category deals, which would cover niche, national, regional. It would kind of cover everybody. But Chris, have you seen anything different than that in promo when you've gotten into it?
N- Not promotionally, and I would say those types of brands typically are underrepresented promotionally of like, branded offers. I think part of it is just process and execution. It takes them a little while to figure out how to do that if they're, newer to Target or Target's a smaller book of business for them. But absolutely, from an assortment strategy perspective, we have seen them, bringing in more that profile of brand, which I do think they need to be a little bit careful of. I think making sure that they are striking that balance. I can see the value of newness, uniqueness, but from a national brand like big vendor partnership perspective, like does the pursuit of that mean that they are weakening those relationships with their top vendors? And particularly from just an investment perspective, we work with some of those brands that they have been bringing in smaller brands to kind of round out the category, and a lot of those are kind of backing away a little bit from what they're investing at Target. So I can see the value in doing it, but I think it is a little bit of a caution flag to Target of making sure they're striking the right balance there.
Yeah, where I've seen it, and again, not promotionally, agreed on assortment. Target loves their kind of unique end product end caps, which Chris Niesen you've probably seen, walking around. But I would say from a retail media point of view, we will see those brands typically heavily invest in search. So not all of them have figured that out, but if they're an Amazon brand that's coming to Target,
Hmm.
Amazon, they're used to spending a ton of their P&L in paid search. And so they walk into Target with, I would say, at least percentage wise, really strong budgets in the paid search world, and then are, using that to kind of buy digital shelf space. That is a very typical strategy. So if you're the existing brand, you need to find your way around that, right? Whether that's pushing traffic in different ways or using your own paid search or whatever it is. But I'd say that's a pretty typical playbook, again, especially if they're an Amazon brand, because their P&L is built in a way to do a lot of digital media.
And search is, the inventory has really been expanded at Target now, where now the first three slots are paid, in the search results. So I think it puts even a little bit more onus on brands to make sure they're playing there to keep up.
Yeah, six of the top nine. So and another question that popped in. So Chris Niesen, if you're a vendor, how are you able to influence Target from like an in-store merch, in-store space planning within this space? So obviously vendors have Catman, right? They have this sort of like, but from your in-store purview and your days at Target, what's the right approach for vendors to sort of bring these ideas to their buyer within this space? Right?
I think the biggest thing that I would say is the time that you do it. You need to be having these conversations early, because these cycles happen so early. Like there's a lot of
And what
conversation
what
about
is
it.
what
What's
is
early?
early? Yes.
Yeah, well, I guess I'd probably be a little off of exactly what that cycle is, but I'm talking months, not weeks, right? Like, I mean, sometimes those decisions are being made 6 months before they're actually hitting the store. And so, those conversations needs to happen early so you get in the planning cycle for those front end caps. Even as it goes into reset timing, like what's the right place for you to be based off of the promotion cadence that you're going to have. So, there's just a lot of cross-functional partners that come into play beyond just the merchants that maybe you're working with on a day-to-day basis that need to be brought into the loop if there's something different that you want to do, whether that be existing end caps, whether that be in aisle. There's a lot of things that you just need to get in front of in a way that have a few more layers to them, including, like I said, space planning, store operations, all of those kind of things. So earlier is always better.
Well, especially, I mean, I remember when I was a buyer and we were doing, reinventions, right? Sometimes those are 12 months more,
Yeah.
right? And as a buyer in that space, you need vendor dollars, right? You're like, this is going to cost me X million dollars, right, to reinvent my space with signing and corrugate and hangers and whatever you're doing, depending on the business. Um, and so I would think, maybe with this, reorg and merchant-led organization, that there could be more space for vendor ideas in this space. That maybe over the next 6 to 12 months, that process is a little different.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's going to be an opportunity to try and stand out in a way that maybe things have not stood out in recent months, getting back to what Target, used to be. And so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for vendors to propose ideas that are potentially new and interesting that will entice Target.
You know, Well, that I would thank you guys for coming. Thank the presenters, Chris and Chris, double Chris. I'm putting up our slides, just sharing emails. And so, again, from a follow-up, you are welcome to, you are encouraged to go follow Chris on LinkedIn. Like I said, 500 different analytics around in-store or analyses around in-store. It's kind of a fun to watch and get inspired about different ways that things come to life. And so, check that out. And Chris and I are there, but you guys hopefully know where to find us. Oh, we did have one last question pop in, so I think if Chris and Chris are around, if hopefully she's still here, they answered the question. So, can we talk about omni-channel approach development within the last 4 years? So, I think is that from a marketing side, I would say at least probably our angle, right? Way to kind of talk about that. And so, Chris Throne, I'll maybe have you think about that. What I would say at first, and Chris Niesen highlighted this earlier, about where Target has done a better job at it approached about making things look the same online versus in store. I think, frankly, early days Cartwheel Circle, we were just shooting from the hip and things looked good online and it worked and great, right? We just optimized to a digital experience. Now that true omni-channel has kind of come around, the integration between the two is much more necessary and I think much more pronounced. And you'll only see that come more with retail media. In-store retail media is going to be a big push across all retailers over the next couple of years. But Chris, now that I gave you time to think, what's your add-on for that space?
I think I'll try to be quick here, but if you are coming in as e-com only, really overinvest to drive as much velocity as possible and be okay with even sub 1.0 ROI. Like the goal is to get in stores and then expand from there. And then I think from like omni-channel, thinking about that e-com side from a content side, agentic AI is just starting, is really going to be a trend. Getting on board with that and figuring out how to optimize your content so that you are, showing up in that recommendation set.
Yeah, I think that's really just starting to hit critical mass these days. And again, that's concept there in some ways that people going to chat GPT or whatnot to get product recommendations. You'll probably have a whole set of brands that get developed in the next, year that really just optimize to how does chat GPT recommend? Because there's going to be so many Americans that are like, what baby food should I buy? And so if somebody,
Hmm.
you have existing baby foods and you're like, all right, well, how can I go build a brand that ChatGPT would say is best? Right. And then once you're launched, that's going to be the best reco. And so I think you'll see quite an interesting proliferation of maybe new brands in that space, almost just to take advantage. The same way we had new brands with ecom came up, 20, 30 years ago. So, but, well, that's it. We will wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And we will follow up with recordings and we will be in touch. Thanks again. Have a great Halloween, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.